Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome to Regrets, the programme in which, as I'm sure you know by now, we talk to people about events in their lives which they may or may not regret. Now, if the biggest regret of our special guest today isn't his sense of humour, then may I respectfully suggest that it ought to be. Ladies and gentlemen, I jest too, a warm welcome, please, for that cracker of some of the corniest gags ever inflicted on a defenceless nation, Mr. Tony Blackburn. Well, on the face of it, his sense of humour apart, Tony has very little to regret. For nearly 20 years now, he's been one of our most successful broadcasters. So before we try to discover what, if anything, he does regret, let's just remind ourselves of the lad's life and times thus far. It was back in the 1960s that Tony Blackburn, then little more than a slip of a lad from Millfield Public School, first made a name for himself. Along with a whole host of other now famous disc jockeys, he worked for the pirate Radio Caroline, anchored in the North Sea. DJs like Tony delighted a music-hungry young nation, but because of their illegal status, they infuriated the government. However, the pirates also did something else. They changed the face of radio broadcasting. For recognising their popularity, the BBC ditched its light programme and created its own pop station, Radio 1. And in September 1969, it was the aforementioned Mr. Blackburn who gave it its very first airing.
Attractive blonde there, sitting over in the corner. Well, if you go up to her and kiss her, then while the kissing turns on...
Radio 1 was an instant success. Within weeks, Tony Blackburn was a household name with the prospect of a happy and secure future. And in 1972, what looked like the icing on the cake, when Tony married Tessa Wyatt, a beautiful young actress. Some of his female fans may have been disappointed, but Tony was blissfully happy. Well, just over a year later, Tony became a father when Tessa gave birth to a little boy called Simon. But for Tony, the joy of parenthood and marriage was not to last. The couple separated, and they're now divorced. Tony, we'll just be serious for a few moments anyway. I presume I'm correct in saying that your biggest regret of all is the breakup of that marriage.
Oh, yes, very, very much so, yes. I've always regretted that, and it, yeah, it altered me totally as a person. I think anybody who's been through a divorce, it must... my regret, I suppose, was talking about it so much, as I am doing now. But I think probably, in retrospect, talking about it so much was a mistake. But sometimes, you know, I feel when I'm on the radio, to me, it is such a natural medium to be in, I sometimes forget that people are listening. Nowadays, I don't have that problem. But, but I think possibly it was a mistake to talk about it so much, yes. Yeah.
Can we just talk about a little bit further? But not because I want to sort of put you through any particular hardship, but I know you do talk about it, and you talk about it quite openly. And I'd like to talk to you about it because I think that, you know, what you went through, thousands and thousands of other people go through all the time in homes all over the country. I mean, it obviously started happily. I mean, what went wrong?
Well, I mean, if I'm honest, and I'm not here to plug a book or anything, but I have an autobiography coming out, and it is in the book, so I might as well own up to it. I fell in love with somebody else, as simple as that. I moved next door to, we moved to a place called Cookham, and next door, I quite like Oriental people, you see, and next door was a very gorgeous Oriental person, and I literally fell in love. It was very stupid, and that's what split us up.
That to me is a revelation, because all the stuff I've read about it previously was that, in fact, you were jealous of her, you were too possessive, etc., etc.
Well, I was as well. I think in any marriage, I don't think it's necessarily one person's fault the whole time. I think it takes two to mess up a marriage, and I think probably, possibly, I think Tessa should have tried a little bit harder, as I did. I realised I'd made a mistake, and I should have got it together, and I tried very hard to get my marriage back again, but of course, once you've made that mistake, it's very difficult. Now we get on very, very well indeed, you know, we always have done, but it was a dreadful mistake and a dreadful thing to do, and I paid very dearly for it.
Just to go back to that situation, I mean, when you actually discovered that you'd fallen in love with somebody else, which, as I say, I'd never heard before, I mean, did you tell her? Did you tell Tessa?
Well, she found out. She found out.
They tend to, don't they?
Yeah, it was a very shallow thing that happened, and after we split up, I did live with the person for about 3 months or so, but she reminded me of, obviously, things that had happened, and she did find out, yes, about it.
And what did she say? What was her reaction?
Well, she wasn't too happy. No. Mind you, she was going out with somebody else as well. You know, show business marriages are difficult. We got involved with show business parties and things like that, and I am quite a shy person, and I went out of my way to go to some of these parties, and you're really on a hiding to nothing. when you do mix with very glamorous people the whole time. And you've got to be very level-headed. If I ever got married again, I would never allow that to happen. And I regret it because the children suffer very badly from it. Luckily, in my own case, my son hasn't suffered from it because we get on very well as people, and my wife and myself, my ex-wife and myself, we made sure that he didn't suffer through it. That's why you never see us pictured with him, because we don't want to drag him into those things. In fact, we both turned down photographic sessions when they want him to be involved in it.
Sure. When you actually, when you were trying to get, I mean, how did you try to get the marriage back together? What did you do? What did you...
Well, I mean, I just tried very, very hard to get it back together again, but she didn't want to know about that. It just happened, and it was one of those things. It was a question of not really having a chance to make it up. It's one of those things that happened. Perhaps she fell out of love with me, or might have been. I certainly didn't fall out of love with her, but it was one of those things. I just couldn't get it back together again. So, and it did affect my career very badly as well.
In what way?
Well, I got very irritable with people, and I think people got a bit fed up with me talking about it as well. I became a crashing bore. I mean, previously I made a living out of being a crashing bore, but it became even worse. You know, it became very serious, and it did reflect very badly on my career, and my career did go downhill because of it.
And you became personally at home, away from the microphone, very depressed. Oh,
I got really depressed. I mean, I've always suffered a little bit through having depressions. I think people who, funnily enough, deal in humour, as inane as any humour might be, you do go through stages where you want to make people laugh, as I've always wanted to try and do, and you desperately think up different ways of doing it, and sometimes it gets depressing, thinking if you go on a stage and somebody doesn't laugh at the thing that you thought was funny, you get worried about it, and you take it too seriously.
I read somewhere, and I think it was an article actually which bore your own name, penned by you, or certainly ghosted for you anyway, that you became so depressed before the end of the marriage that you tried to commit suicide. Is that true?
Yes, I did. I took some... I was taking Valium, you know, which half the country's, I think, hooked on Valium and stuff like that. And I did take it one time. It was a cry from the heart, I think, at the time, because I was watching Faulty Towers, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well go out having a good laugh. And it was a very funny episode as well. I'm glad in retrospect that I didn't actually commit suicide, because there were lots of other episodes that I wouldn't have seen. So I don't think really that I wanted to, but Tessa found me, and the doctor said you're just going to have a very good sleep. And I remember Tessa drove me to Broadcasting House to do my breakfast show, or I was on between 9 and 12, I think, and the room was going round and round, and I was still managing to come up with these ridiculous jokes. And nobody realised, you know, nobody realised that. And then I suddenly realised, well, if I can do it under the influence of all these drugs, you know, I can't be that good a broadcaster, or nobody's listening, because I was slurring a little bit. I think my mother noticed I was slurring a bit, but I'd never do a thing like that again.
Well, I hope you wouldn't.
No.
I read
unless the show goes very badly.
It's going fine, don't worry. The last thing we want, I can assure you. I read in the same article, and I was intrigued by this, that when the split eventually came, the night before the two of you parted, the night before Tessa left the house, you asked her to have this formal dinner party in which you wore black tie and the whole bit. Now, why? Well,
it was a sort of a joke. I mean, well, it was a sort of joke. It was a pathetic joke. I wanted... it was our last meal together, you see, and I wanted her to remember it. And I wanted to remember it, so I put this full evening dress on. I thought probably, in a strange sort of way, that seeing me there in a bow tie and things like that might say, well, he's not all that bad, you know, let's forget about it and let's pull ourselves together. But it didn't work. You know, if you put on a dinner jacket and go down into your own home and there's only two of you there, and you're prepared to go to those depths, and it still doesn't work. We very nearly got back together again about 2 months later. We went to a restaurant in Windsor. I invited her out to a restaurant in Windsor. And unfortunately, one of the waiters, because a lot of waiters get tipped off for giving information. I mean, our marriage was announced before we'd even announced it to anybody else, because I went in to buy the engagement ring, and somebody in the shop tipped the newspapers off that we were getting engaged. And we went into this restaurant in Windsor, and obviously somebody there tipped the Daily Mail, it was actually, or one of the newspapers off, that we were getting back together again. And she didn't believe that I hadn't tipped the papers off, and that was the...
And that scuppered the
Yeah,
deal.
that was it, right.
Now, again, something that I want to ask you about, because simply because I'm sure thousands and thousands of men and women have been through the same experience. When the day she left, you go off, presumably, to do your show, your radio broadcast, very depressed, but still having to crack jokes, which must be very difficult indeed. And then You come back to an empty house.
Yeah.
A house which had been occupied by happiness, by your wife and your son. Suddenly there's only you there.
Yeah.
What goes on in your head?
Well, it's dreadful, because, I mean, I was doing the show aware that my ex-wife, my son, and 2 little dogs, I love animals, I had 2 little dogs that I adored, and they were all moving out. And then you come back and you see rooms that are empty, totally empty, and you realise what you've done. And it's one of those things that, well, I mean, you know, I regret for the rest of my life, because I love children. I still get on very well with Tessa. And, you know, it's one of those things. I absolutely messed it up. I've just got myself to blame, and that is my only, I'd say, probably regret in my life, and it's the biggest regret. And
she, of course, later went to live with Richard O'Sullivan,
yeah.
Although we should make it plain, as far as I understand it anyway, he was not actually
Oh, it was
part of the
nothing to do with
breakup.
him. It's a really nice guy.
What were your feelings? Because they were in a comedy series together, weren't they? They were in Robin's Nest together. What were your feelings when you sat in that empty house and you saw the 2 of them on the screen?
I didn't watch the show. No, I didn't watch it, because I like Richard very much. And, but I didn't watch the show, really. I didn't want to see that very much. And so I purposely didn't watch it. I'd never seen the series.
We're going to go into a break in a second or two. Let me just ask you this personal question. Do you still love Tessa?
I like her very much indeed, yeah. Yeah, she's a very nice person. I haven't met anybody else since, this is why, I mean, I've been divorced about 9 years now. I haven't met anybody else that I like better than her. No, we get on very well, which is nice, because it's good for our son as well, and I adore him. And luckily he's my best friend, really. We're like sort of brothers together, really. He's a little bit more sane than I am, and he keeps me really sane. And I work really for him, and you know, we all get on very well together. We don't go out. I mean, I don't go out with Tessa anymore or anything like that. Sometimes we go out and have lunch together as a family, which is nice. But no, I think we sorted it out. We're just like that. We're good friends, and that's it.
Very glad to hear it. We're going to take a break there. In a couple of minutes, we'll be continuing our conversation with Tony and asking him, among other things, where he goes from here. Stay with us. Thank you very much indeed, and welcome back to Regrets, where today we're talking to Tony Blackburn, a man who, despite his jokey radio image, has, like many other people, suffered his fair share of setbacks. Tony, we've been talking in the first half about your marriage. One thing you did raise was the fact that you talked about it a lot on radio, and you now regret that. I'm just a little puzzled as to why you did it. I mean, was it therapeutic?
I honestly don't know. You know, I've got no idea. It was a big thing that was happening in my life, and I was basically, I think growing up, I'm the first generation, really, of people that have grown up with the listeners. In other words, I started now 21 years ago. There are people now who, like myself, married, divorced. There are people who have become grandmothers. There are people who are born, who, when I started broadcasting, they weren't even born. And so you're going into people's lives and you're sharing their lives and they're sharing it with you. And I've based a lot of my career around the fact that I try to be fairly honest. I want to make people laugh, but I like to share those emotions with people because I like to get involved. This is what I love about now Radio London and local radio, which I much prefer to national radio, because you can actually get people ringing you up and you can be part of their lives. And they have all these problems, and it made me a much better broadcaster.
It may well have made you a better broadcaster, but did it, in the end, lead to your departure from Radio 1? I mean, was it one of the reasons, anyway, that you left? Because at times, your bosses were less than pleased with what you said on the radio, weren't they?
Yes, I thought they were moderately stupid, though. Yeah. I mean, I think... I really do. I mean, I think in the early days of Radio 1 it was okay, but I have no respect whatsoever for some authority. I mean, I'm sort of very rebellious to a certain extent. I'm still very piratical in my thinking. I think when you're younger, you think to yourselves, you look at politicians and you look at some people talking away, as I'm on television now, and you think, they can't be that stupid. And then you grow up and you meet some of these people, and they are. And some of these people are... some of these people who are in charge of...
Have you got anyone in mind?
Not you, John. I thought you were stupid for ages.
Oh,
I mean,
fine. As long as we've cleared it up. As long as we've cleared it up, yeah.
No, but some people who run radio stations, and television stations, sometimes, you know, they don't really know what they're doing. And some people who run countries don't know what they're doing. And some people are far too old to be in those positions. And I think it's tragic. And not everybody, I'm not saying everybody, but I've come up against that. I think some of my bosses at Radio 1 were far too old, and they lost touch with what was going on. And in the later days, the last shows I was doing, which were meant to be for children, I knew damn well that the children wouldn't enjoy them because they were totally out of touch. And there was nothing I could do about it, and they were making me sound terribly old-fashioned.
Well, the point I was going to raise with you, I mean, I take on board what you say. I don't know, I've not worked in radio, but the point I was going to raise with you was this, that it seems to me you've given body and soul to broadcasting in more ways than one. You've bared your soul a lot on radio, talk about the marriage, talk about lots of other things as well. And you are a workaholic. I mean, you actually work your socks off. And I wonder why you bare your soul to broadcasting and what effect it's had on your life and whether you have any regrets about that. I mean, socially, what social life do you have?
Well, very little, actually, because now a lot of the country won't realise, but I work on Radio London, and I do that. I'm very involved. I select all the music. I do a lot of what you would call production now. And I work on cable and satellite television, and I get all those programmes together.
But why?
Oh, I just adore it. You know, I'm totally in love with radio. I mean, I came off Valium and got hooked on radio and television. I mean, I don't take anything, any of that rubbish now.
But at what cost?
I just love it. You know, to me, I go on the radio, and I'm my happiest when I'm broadcasting, because I love talking rubbish. I adore talking rubbish, and I think there is a need for people to talk absolute utter nonsense.
But what's it done to... Well, fine, and there obviously it's because people listen to you in their thousands, but what's it done to Tony Blackburn, the person? I mean, what about you? How many people do you have who you can call real friends?
Oh, I don't have any, very few friends. I'd say my son is my best friend. I'd say Tessa's a very good friend. Apart from that, nobody. I think that possibly is a problem. But I'm so lucky. I mean, we're all so lucky to be working. I mean, there are 4 million people unemployed. I've got a job that I adore. And so you can't have everything in life. I mean, okay, my personal life and my social life is a bit disastrous most of the time because I'm working the whole time. When anybody who goes out, I mean, I get up at, 7:15 in the morning, and I'm normally on stage at 1 o'clock at night, the following morning as such, so I get very little sleep. But I adore it. I mean, I go on stage, I'm probably doing a striptease at 12:30 at night. Which I do. So I like to go up and entertain. I mean, I do these strip teasers and all this nonsense and things like that. It's lovely. It's good fun.
The joy you get.
I have a terrific body as well.
The joy you get. Don't ask me to. Don't prove it to us, please. The joy you get from entertaining. Yes. I mean, is it worth the price you pay? Is it worth the fact that you only have, as you say, a handful of people that you can call on as real friends?
Yeah. Well, if it was, I work with lovely, very nice people now. Which that's one of the reasons I did leave Radio 1, because I couldn't stand the backbiting and things. So now I'm working with people I really adore and I like and I respect, and they're younger as well. In fact, everybody I work with now is younger than me, which is a bit tragic. But
happens to us all.
It does happen to us all, yeah. But no, I mean, yeah, sure, if I could have a happy family life and probably be going out with somebody that I really liked, that would be marvellous, but it hasn't happened at the moment, so I put all my efforts into my work.
But I wonder why it hasn't happened. Is it possible it hasn't happened?
Probably an appalling person to be with, probably.
No, I doubt it, you see. I doubt it, you see. I mean, is it possible it hasn't happened because you put so much effort into broadcasting and so much effort into your work that there's very little of you left to give to anybody else?
Well, possibly, but on the other hand, I'm at the stage in my life when I'd rather be working than be spending my time with somebody that I didn't particularly want to be with, and I think the chances of finding somebody, particularly in the world of show business, which is a very false and I don't mix with show business people very much, so I find them a little bit false, and I mean, you only have to look at some of those awards where everybody's slapping one another on the back, and they all call one another darling because they can't remember one another's names. And I'm not involved in that side of it. I like to go home and watch television myself, and I don't have that particular philosophy in life. I like basically to work very hard. If somebody comes along that I would love to be with and they'd like to be with me, that would be marvellous. But so far, I'm very happy with the radio.
I'm going to throw back to much earlier in the programme when you used a word about yourself, which surprised me actually, because it follows on from what you just said, that you were shy. I mean, quite honestly, listening to you sit here in front of all these people, listening to you on Radio 1, listening to you on Radio London, as I do, shy, honestly, is the very last word I'd use to describe Tony Blackburn. But are you telling me that in there is a very shy person?
Oh, I think so. I think all the best performers, and I'm not classing myself amongst those, but all the people that I've interviewed, the actors and the actresses and the comedians, basically, they're all fairly shy people. I mean, one of the shyest people I've ever met is Jimmy Young. Terry Wogan has a certain amount of shyness. We all have a certain amount of shyness. I mean, a lot of people think we're very conceited. I mean, in my case, just because once I thought of joining the Royal Navy just to let the world see me. But, but there is a shyness there, yes. I'm more at home on the radio, behind a microphone, or for that matter, on a stage. But to go into a party, I'm not very good in party atmospheres sometimes. I'm much better than I used to be, because I think when you get a little bit older, then you get a bit of confidence.
But it's a damn funny profession to pick for someone who's shy, isn't it? I mean, your entire life is spent doing this, talking to 150 people in here today, performing to millions.
I don't think so.
Why? I mean, is it some kind of compensation for your shyness? Or is it some kind of, what's the right word for it? I mean, are you on radio because you're shy? Is that what you're saying?
Well, on the radio, you are a giant size what you would like to be. In other words, you build yourself up to what you be. Because, I mean, on Radio London now, I do a sort of fairly risque programme, and I put myself over as, here I am, and I'm chatting everybody up. And that'd be lovely. I mean, if my private life was what it was like between 9 and 12 in the morning, I'd have dart rings under my eyes. I'd be like this.
You see, that intrigues me as well. I've listened to your show, and it's naughty, there's no doubt about it. By BBC standards, it's very, very naughty indeed. Now,
very naughty.
I should explain, he plays sort of macho man, and he chats up all the ladies, and he makes certain suggestions to them that they would not become me to make on this programme. Is that some kind of, again, some kind of compensation? Is that what you really want to be? Is that the Tony Blackburn who's screaming to get out?
No, I think it's fun. I think radio got behind all the other parts of the media. In other words, it got behind television, where we're adults, and I mean, it's the first PG-rated programme. I call it a PG-rated, parents' guidance at all times, because we'll talk about risque subjects. Only in the interest of research, of course.
Indeed.
Yes. The Sun newspaper, you can look at the Sun or the Daily Star or the Mirror, and you've got nude photographs on there, and they're talking about sexual exploits that people have got up to. And we're only doing that. I want to build it up a little bit more. I'm fed up with listening to radio stations that are the whole time U-rated, non-adult entertainment. And I think in this country we are terribly worried about talking about sexual subjects and things like that. And I think it's rather silly, because why not? It doesn't matter. And if people are offended by it, they can switch it off.
I just wonder how long Tony Blackburn, the sort of boy wonder of radio as I remember it, because you're not that much older than me, just a tiny bit.
Really?
Now 42 years old. I just wonder how long Tony Blackburn can go on being a disc jockey.
Well, you see, in America, I would be considered to be fairly young as a disc jockey, because and if you look on this country, really, the better disc jockeys are the older guys, really. I think I can go on for quite a time. I'd love to run a radio station. In fact, I'd like to run a soul music radio station, and I'd like to get into that side of it. But I really do love talking on the microphone, and I consider that the people that listen to me, they've grown up with me for 21 years now, and I would feel that if I didn't have that microphone, I'd be cut off from them. It would be like losing a whole family who are, it sounds very corny, but they're very important to me.
And there'd be a great gap and a great void in your own life.
Oh, for me, it would be disastrous. I mean, I might as well just give up, really.
Well, I hope you don't. I'm sure you won't.
Yeah.
You clearly do enjoy talking.
I love it.
And you do it very well indeed.
Thank you.
Tony Blackburn, thank you very much indeed. That's just about it from us. Join us, if you will, please, for the next edition of Regrets. Until then, from all of us here in Southampton, a very goodbye to you.